sorry it's been forever since I made a tutorial. I've been busy setting up the foundation of my new business, File Mimi Art. So today we're going to talk about how to paint like Alphonse Mucha. Now I want to emphasize this isn't about replicating his work exactly, especially because his originals were often several feet tall. But it's more about going through the motions of drawing the same curves and making the same color decisions in an attempt to learn why he made those decisions and what makes this piece so successful. I start by soaking some thick watercolor paper in warm water for 10 minutes. This allows the fibers to pre-stretch so they don't stretch as you're painting and warp. I'm using the Arches cold press watercolor paper, size 16 by 12 inches. I don't recommend going any smaller than this size because then your figure's face will be too small and more difficult to draw. I start by painting the entire page with a sepia colored watercolor and then letting it dry moderately before pressing it underneath some books or heavy weights to let it flatten and dry for another day or two. If you notice, I often start on tracing paper, and that's so I can easily reposition, rotate, or start over without damaging the expensive paper. I then use a light box and start to trace over the sketch that I had started. You can get a really inexpensive light box for around $25 that's thin and portable just like this. In theory, you could trace over the original, but I think that defeats the point of the practice because you want to go over the motions of making the curves and getting the proportions and strokes and line weights correctly without tracing. Throughout the drawing process, I'm constantly comparing it to the original and flipping the image either with a mirror or you can take a photo and then flip it that way. And flipping it allows you to see if there's anything that is out of proportion or that just looks odd. Once you get the drawing to where you want it to be, you can begin inking it with a waterproof pen. I use the Micron 003 to start, especially for the face and some light shading. Then I start to build up on it with the 005 and higher. Especially with the border, I would do a 05, so a much thicker pen to outline the border. What makes Alphonse Mucha's work distinctive is that the parts of the figure that touch the background get treated with a darker outline. So I go back in with a thicker pen, like a 005 or a 01, and darken those lines that touch the background. I usually start with the skin tone first. I don't know why in this piece I decided to do the hair first, but I recommend starting with the skin first because that's usually the most challenging part because it gets scarier when you're close to finish with the piece to start doing the skin tone. Also, if you don't have darker adjacent colors next to the skin, you can start off with a lighter skin tone and then build on it later once you start adding the adjacent colors. Since in watercolor, it's really hard to go backwards and lighten the skin later. Try to match the colors as carefully as possible because part of what makes this piece so great is the color. Once your figure is all colored in, I go back in with this masking fluid. This is waterproof, so you cover up the parts that you want to leave white. I also go over like lighter areas like the skin tone and really delicate parts that you don't want colored in so that we can easily fill in the background. Lastly, fill in the background, and as you go, before the paint dries, use a paper towel and dab in the clouds. I do this a couple times to get the right saturation. A neat trick is if you find that your colors are not sophisticated enough, they're a little too bright, you can add a little bit of brown into your color to get a more sophisticated tone. Once the paint is dry, don't forget to peel off your masking fluid. You can gently rub it off with your finger. And there you have it. Thank you so much for joining me. If you like these tutorials, you can head over to my Patreon. Patreon rewards include exclusive work in progress images, digital downloads, free merch, and even the ability to vote on my next tutorial or drawing, and much more. So don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and have fun and make art.